Hola muchachos, ¿qué tal? Buenos días. Aquí tienen el horario para hoy, lunes el 4 de noviembre. Just going to do a quick review of the notes that we took last week, at the beginning of last week, before your Dia de los Muertos celebration. Where we last left off was with the uses of the subjunctive, and in particular with verbs of emotion. Just a quick review, we're on page 30 of the textbook, and reviewing these notes before we dive into today's activities. The subjunctive, as you may recall from the beginning of the academic year, requires two subjects, right? The main clause, the subject, and the verb conjugated in the main clause are in the present tense, present indicative. And then your second subject in the subordinate clause is going to be different. The subject will be different than that of the first clause, and for that reason, your verb in the second clause, subordinate clause, is in the subjunctive. First subject, first clause, regular present tense. Second subject, or verb rather, and second subject in the subordinate clause is going to be in the subjunctive. Remember how to formulate the subjunctive? That's back on page 14, I want to say, indeed, how the present subjunctive is formed by starting with the io form in the regular present tense. And that's particularly helpful when you look at irregular verbs that have an irregular conjugation in the io form. So it's important to always start with the present indicative io form, remove the o, utilize that stem, and then add to that stem your present subjunctive endings. AR verbs taking upon what are traditionally ER and IR endings in the present tense, and then ER and IR verbs taking upon what are traditionally AR endings in the present tense. They essentially flip-flop in the present subjunctive. You can look at notes back on page 14 and 15 for how those conjugations would look. It's going to take practice. And then there are, of course, some irregularities. With Kargar-Zar verbs, we use that spelling change. Excuse me, when we conjugate in the subjunctive. As you can see there for Kar, Gar, and Zar verbs, the spelling changes, and then still using the regular AR endings in the subjunctive. And then you have a few irregular verbs in the subjunctive. And these verbs are irregular in all tenses. So they should come as no surprise there. Back to page 30. So fundamentally needing two subjects, two different subjects, and then que, the intermediary between the two. So when you have a verb in the main clause that expresses emotion, such as hope, fear, joy, pity, or surprise, then the subjunctive is required in the subordinate clause. In the main clause, expressions of emotion, such as hope, fear, joy, pity, or surprise. When you have an expression of emotion in the main clause, the subjunctive is required in the subordinate clause. Taking a look at some examples. Nos alegramos, we are happy. De que te gustan las flores, we are happy that you like the flowers. This is an expression of joy. And the subjunctive is used. You can see the verb gustar is conjugated in the subjunctive. Siento que tú no puedas venir mañana. Sorry that you cannot come tomorrow. Siento is, I guess, pity, would be pity or regret. And then the subjunctive of poder, puedas. Remember poder, or any other verb, we're going to use the yo form in the regular present tense. Puedo, remove the o ending, and then as would be the two-form subjunctive conjugation. Temo que, I fear that, or I'm afraid that. Ana no pueda ir mañana. Very similar to this second example. This would be fear or pity in this situation. Subjunctive used. The verb that comes after que and the subjunctive. And then finally, le sorprende que Juan sea tan joven. It's surprising that Juan is so young. Subjunctive is always going to be that verb in the subordinate clause, and the subjunctive is being called for here because we have expressions of emotion or feeling in the main clause. There are those expressions, as you can see in the blue box. You took these down when we took notes on the acronym WEIRD, which has the 5 situations that call for the subjunctive, and some additional examples here of expressions of emotion in the main clause, and therefore requiring the subjunctive in the subordinate clause. So what we're going to do today, to start off, is the warm-up, Inténtalo, which is on page 32. And then we're going to do some, where is it? 33. You guys are going to create some expressions of emotion about how things are going in school, government, or any other theme of your choosing. And you're going to use expressions of emotion such as those on page 30. Me alegro de que, I'm happy that. Temo que, I'm fearful that. Es extraño que, it is strange that. And again, you pick the topic. I'm going to have you and your partner on the whiteboards create some expressions of feelings and emotions. How are things going on in this world 2020 for you, however micro or macro you want to take it. For example, me alegro que vayan a limpiar el río. I'm happy that they are going to clean the river. And remember, when you're creating these expressions, fundamentally for them to use the subjunctive, I don't know, we can push on that a little bit, but really, you need to have 2 different subjects on either side of que. I think there might be a situation, just thinking about it now, like I'm happy that I got a good grade on my exam. I don't know. I'll have to dig into that a little bit more. I don't know if that would necessarily require the subjunctive. Typically, you need to have a different subject on either side of que. And you can see all these examples have that. So, an expression of emotion, using those expressions from page 30 in the main clause, and then whatever it is that's transpiring thereafter that is surprising, or that you are fearful of, or that is strange, whatever that subject is in the subordinate clause, the verb associated will be in the subjunctive. And then we're gonna finish off with activity 5. And activity 5, I have a handout for you guys to do. And I'm going to walk you through that handout right now. So there are 2 parts to this handout. Part 1, estás muy preocupado por los problemas del medio ambiente. You are very worried or preoccupied by the problems of the environment. Y le comentas a tu compañero o compañera todas tus preocupaciones. You are commenting to your partner, compañero, companion, all your worries about the environment, problems with the environment. Él o ella, tu compañero o compañera, va a darte la solución adecuada para tus preocupaciones. So your partner, or you amongst each other, are going to give each other the solution to your worries, or some advice rather. Cada uno de ustedes tiene una hoja distinta con la información necesaria para completar la actividad. So everything that you need to complete this activity is on this paper. So again, one person confides the problem, the other person provides the solution. Dile a tu compañero cada una de tus preocupaciones utilizando los siguientes dibujos. So share with your partner, interpret what's going on here in the chapter, or excuse me, in the picture. And in terms of the vocabulary needed, you can, let me go back here, forgive me. You have a handout that goes over all the key vocabulary in this chapter. I gave it to you at the very beginning about 2 weeks ago when we started the chapter. And you have textbook pages 19 and 20 that have a comprehensive glossary let's see, not 19 and 20, forgive me, 20, 21, and then probably wanting to use a little bit of 22, especially when it comes to the verbs or actions. So 20, 21, and 22 would be very helpful pages to refer to, or that handout that I gave you, which is a glossary of all the vocabulary for this chapter. So, for example, me molesta que las personas tiren basura en las calles. This would be letter A, yes? Me molesta, again, going back to the expressions on page 30 of emotion. Me molesta is I'm bothered by, or it bothers me, right? Me molesta que las personas tiren basura en las calles. It bothers me that people throw away trash. Tirar is the verb to throw, and notice it's an AR verb, how it's conjugated in the subjunctive according to the subject in the subordinate clause. Me molesta que las personas tiren basura en las calles. It bothers me that people throw or toss trash in the streets. This is an environmental problem, right? Los problemas del medio ambiente. Now your partner is going to give you the solution. And the solution, you're going to pick one of these options here from letters A through B. And you can see the response, and I think actually it's provided Estudiante 2 on the first page has a suggestion that is very, actually, yeah, identical. Yeah, so everything you need is on that first page. So the problem and then the solution. Estudiante 2 has the solution. Por eso, therefore, es muy importante que los políticos hagan leyes para conservar las ciudades limpias. Therefore, it is very important that politicians make laws to conserve clean cities. So, es muy importante que would be an expression of, an impersonal expression of emotion. Los políticos is the subject of our second clause. And then the verb hacer, remember, starting with the yo form, hago, yo hago, I do, the yo form of hacer in the present tense, remove the o ending, and then add your subjunctive ending. In this case, talking about los políticos, it would be hagan. Es muy importante que los políticos hagan leyes para conservar las ciudades limpias. It's very important that politicians make laws to conserve clean cities. I know it's hard to put all these together. You're utilizing new vocabulary, syntax, putting it all together, conjugating verbs in the subjunctive, not looking for it to be perfect. What I am looking for mainly, expression of emotion in the main clause, such as these two problem and response examples. And then are you able, whatever verb you're using, are you able to conjugate it correctly in the subjunctive? Does all the vocabulary make sense? Well, ideally, but if not the end of the world. Is your syntax being the word order of all the parts of speech perfect? Well, ideally, but that's not necessarily what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is you being able to fundamentally construct main clause. If we go back to page 30, this is what I'm looking for. Can you come up with a main clause that uses an expression of emotion conjugated correctly in the present tense? Can you come up with a verb in the subjunctive, in the subordinate clause, conjugated correctly? That's what I'm looking for. Main clause with an expression of will or influence, and subordinate clause with one of the vocabulary expressions on page 22. A lot of these verbs are going to be verbs that are going to be in the subjunctive on page 22, and maybe utilizing a little bit of the vocabulary as well on pages 21 and 20.